Stop shopping. Stop. Stop shopping.
Stop shopping, people.
Stop shopping. Stop.
Slow down that consumerism. Amen. Praise me. Oh, yeah. Stop
Shopping. Stop.
buying things.
Stop shopping.
Get out of the big box stores.
Stop.
Stop buying weapons. Back away from fossil fuels.
Stop shopping.
Start gift economies. Anybody with me here? Anybody with me here? Somebody give me the give-hallelujah. Somebody give me give-hallelujah.
Stop. Stop shopping. Stop.
This is a mega church.
Stop.
I dream of a church this big. Amen. Hallelujah. Bigger than a storefront church. This is the church of Stop Shopping.
We're wondering what to do. Apocalypses come right through. The flames are high, the floods are too. From this world I thought I knew, this natural world that brought me you. Fires, floods, tsunamis, quake, what a difference apocalypse makes. When we're wondering where to turn, apocalypses make us learn. The sky it burns,
The blackbirds cry.
in this world where I will die, this natural world, we all must die. Fires, floods, tsunamis, quakes, what a difference.
What a difference.
Apocalypse makes.
What a difference apocalypse makes. Oh, yeah.
Apocalypse makes. Apocalypse
All right, let's face up to what's going on right now.
We thought we could raise the alarm, but there were always other fires.
It's all over.
And the children don't know.
The children don't know.
The children do not know.
It's the end of the world.
Could shout the story, but the silence grew. It grew and grew. And the creatures don't know. The creatures do not know. Who will tell the creatures it's the end of the world? It's the end of the world. Only so many beautiful days on earth. We thought there might be more magic, but we sold off our most ancient power. And the spirits don't know. The spirits do not know. Who will tell the spirits it's the end of the world? It's the end of the world. Only so many beautiful days on earth. Your trees are gone, your fish are dead, your sky it moves over no one's head. Oh,
Cloud, lonely cloud. Only sand falls down
on
empty ground.
only cloud, only sand falls down on empty ground. Who will tell the children? Who will tell the creatures? Who will tell the spirits? Only so many beautiful days.
Oh, it's
Only so many beautiful
it's over.
days.
Earth-alleluia. Hallelujah, Reverend. Here in this city, in this country, and unfortunately in this world, we've got a cop problem.
Monday at the deli, talking all at once, grabbing hands and shouting, get home safe. Tuesday school's out early, wandering through the park, throwing shade and laughing, get home safe. Wednesday after practice, walking to the train, streets alive, a party, get home safe. Working late on Thursday, trying to stay awake. Parking lot is empty, get home safe. Man down, brother down. Man down, brother down. Friday's family dinner, don't be late. Can't keep your mama waiting, get home safe. Saturday's a wedding, girls dressed up, watching out the window, get home safe. And even Sundays, there's no resting, even Sunday, get home safe. Man down, brother down. 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 Man down,
Get home safe.
brother down.
Get home safe.
Man down,
Get home safe.
Get home safe. Man down,
Get home safe.
brother down.
Get home safe.
Man down,
Get home safe.
brother down.
Get home safe.
Man down, get home safe.
Michael Brown.
Michael Brown. Amadou Diallo. A.D. Cardenas.
Stephen Clark.
Stephen Clark. Ayanna Stanley Jones.
Eleanor Bumpers.
Eleanor Bumpers.
Victor Jara.
Victor Yar.
Sandra Bland.
Akai Gurley.
Akai Gurley.
Roxana Hernandez.
Roxana Hernandez.
Fred Hampton.
Fred Hampton.
Eric Garner.
Eric Garner.
Trayvon Martin. Claudia Patrice Gomez Gonzalez.
Claudia Patrice Gomez Gonzalez.
Zahid Vassell.
Saeed Bassel.
Oscar Grant.
Oscar Grant.
Sean Bell.
Sean Bell.
Charlene Lyles.
Charlene Lyles.
Rakia Boyd.
Rakia Boyd.
Philando Castillo.
Philando Castillo.
Emmett Till.
Emmett Till.
Welcome, everybody, to the Church of Stop Shopping. We'd like to dedicate our fabulous worship today to Joel Covell. Joel, presente. We know you're here. The theme this year is, more or less, what the hell happened?
Amen.
How do we get here? And built into that, of course, built into that, how do we stop it? How do we get out of it? How do we make our next Left Forum meeting much different? Not this tragic feeling that we feel right now. Not this knowledge that we have that murder has been normalized. It's been normalized by colonial military expeditions for centuries, and in our lifetime, the series of illegal, immoral wars. But now they're testing to see if they can normalize our murdering us right here. ICE goes into our neighbors' homes and pulls fathers out of the living room because they discovered unpaid parking tickets from 11 years ago.
Keep families together.
At least the question this year has an immediacy to it. I'm sick and tired of listening to my European friends ask the question, where's the American left anyway? Anybody know what I'm talking about? You have a European friend who will ask the question, you don't have a left. Well, that didn't sound like a question, did it? You know what I'm saying? Yes. We have those friends.
Yes, Reverend.
The question's more like, where the hell is the left? We know we're here in this room, and we know we're all over this country and this world, and we're rebuilding, we're looking, we're testing, we're finding out what to do, and we're resituating our personal commitments. Because a number of us were activists big time in our 20s. Amen. You're going to walk right up to the altar here, sir? That's why bishops wear all that weaponry, you know. They keep the hoi polloi back at beyond the first pew. In our church, we're in recovery from our grandparents' fundamentalism, but we love some of the gospel music. Amen. The question, where is the left, is a question that each of us are personally answering right now. I am the left.
That's right.
And I know that I was an activist in my 20s and 30s, and maybe I went off and had a professional life, or maybe I went off and had a family and didn't quite hit the streets as often, but I know that I'm ready to come back.
That's right. Right, preacher.
And some people say the American left disappeared, never really got past FDR. Other people say, well, the Red Scare destroyed the left. And other people, they think the left died when Fred Hampton was shot. We know the left is here. But if we had a couple drinks and you got me talking, I might say, well, the left went online. Anybody know what I'm talking about?
Never heard of it.
And I believe that we feel in our hearts that right thinking isn't doing it anymore. Opinions and persuasion, our Marxian historicity, our research, our data, it's not quite enough to have the idea. Billy Strayhorn and Duke Ellington said, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
Yes, Reverend.
You don't swing that much in front of a screen.
Wake up.
We have gone through a change in our group, our affinity group here, our activists who sing. For years, we led parades and sang all over against Monsanto, marches against Monsanto. Every year it was another city, Miami, Chicago, London. We were always, that was our thing for years. And our labor of love, our revolutionary labor of love was, hey folks, the big chemical companies are putting this chemical into the soil and the water and the air, and you can't smell it, you can't see it. It's called glyphosate, it's called neonicotinoids, it's killing us, it's giving us cancer, it's killing the honeybees. But we were trying to get people to imagine. We couldn't help but be in the world of ideas because we were saying, imagine the evil that this will be. And we were talking about cancer 10 years from now, maybe. And then suddenly, last January 11th, the Immigration Customs Enforcement people, ICE, came and took one of our singers. And boy, we were not online anymore. And we were not in the world of ideas alone. We were starting to listen to Billy Strayhorn and the Duke. Starting to listen to William Carlos Williams, no ideas but in things. Oh, but it feels different when a member of your family is taken by ICE.
Yes.
Now, how different? I'd like to spend a couple minutes talking about how different it is to physicalize your information, to physicalize what you believe in, and how the left needs to do that again. We always knew this, but knowledge and praxis is a second kind of knowledge. And we can go for years, am I right? We can go for years remembering what's correct. We can go for years remembering what we believe. Amen? But we get out of our praxis. We get out of the doing. And it's not in our body as much anymore. It starts to fade. On January 11th, they tried to take our friend from the choir. His name's Ravi. Tried to take him in a government vehicle from the Jacob Javits Federal Building to the Varick Street Immigration Jail. Know what I'm talking about? Just a couple blocks. And the choir laid down in front of that vehicle. Amen? We laid down in front of that vehicle. And we were joined by probably many of you. There were 150 of us. 18 of us were arrested. Jimana Williams was one of them. Jumaane, are you here yet? Amen? Now, our feeling about immigration rights is completely different. It's in our bodies. We miss Ravi so much. We get to see him. They turned his jet around in Florida. Some lawsuit or something. He's still among us, and I think he's leading a panel tomorrow here in this in this college. Our bodies are full of millions of beings that are all conscious. I'm talking about the ligaments and the blood, talking about the gut biomes, talking about the electromagnetic jettisoning. We have a universe in our bodies. Our body is the media empire. They have probes, they have cameras now, little that go into our bodies, and they take pictures. And what they see is, it looks like, it's constantly described as looking exactly like the Northern Lights. Flashes of life, of information, of feelings. And once what you believe, and I believe that Ravi, with his children here, with his full citizen partner here, his wife here, Amy, with how he helps immigration people at the New Sanctuary Coalition, what he does, he needs to be here. I believe that from the bottom of my heart. There it is. I said that from the bottom of my heart. Let's listen to that phrase again. It's not just a song by ABBA. My heart. That knowledge really is in my heart. And it's different, very different, being inside my body than it is on the pixelated screen. Very different. And one manifestation of that difference is, it's no big deal. In fact, I am honored to lay my body down in front of those vehicles. And we do it every month. We go to the Varick Immigration Jail. And for 90 minutes on the third Thursday of every month, we lay down in front of those vehicles and we stop that operation. 90 minutes. We did it for 90 minutes. Hey, we're just trying to teach New York City what it means to be a sanctuary city. We are a sanctuary city. We are a gift economy. We give to each other. We don't just love, we make love. We are physical. We give each other food. We give each other shelters. We help each other out. We give to each other. It is in our bodies. It feels good. It feels good to be a radical leftist. It feels good. Wow. It is love. It's love. I want everybody in this room. Remember what my reverse mentor used to say, Billy Graham? Yeah, he used to say, we all are going to die, and why don't you come up to the altar and convert to Jesus Christ, because you might die before you get here. Amen. That went over like a lead balloon. That was just, I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny. It's more tragic than it is funny, and I just want to apologize to each and every one of you. ICE is disappearing between 55 and 60 New Yorkers each week, according to the New Sanctuary Coalition. And we believe that protecting our neighbors, secretly pulling them into our homes and providing for them, taking them to churches and synagogues, whatever form sanctuary takes, we believe that it is an active form of love, revolutionary love. This is something that the left can do, that the right cannot impede, cannot stop, cannot oppose. And it is the beginning of a kind of energy, the beginning of a kind of organizing that will change us all. We will have our beliefs in our bodies. We will have physicalized our love. Let's do that over the next year. Are there some of you who will take people into your homes, take people into your community centers and churches and synagogues? Will some of you visit us on the third Thursday of each month down at the Varick Street Immigration Jail and face those vehicles, those vans that they use to steal people. Sanctuary. 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 This issue isn't that much different than the issue of stopping Monsanto, or stopping mountaintop removal, or getting $15 an hour at Walmart. They're all one issue. It's just we don't have the words yet to make them one issue, to understand them as one issue. But our bodies do. Our bodies have those words. Our bodies will tell us. Earth-alleluia. Love-alleluia. Change-alleluia.
En un lugar hay una guerra. En algún lugar es una catástrofe. Y en algún lugar capital está matando. Algunas personas sueñan distintos sueños de aquellos junto a los que nacieron. Y algunos sueños no se hacen realidad. Tantas razones para partir como para vivir. Y la causa de la partida es la vida. Hay que vivir. Hay que vivir. Y intentamos partirles como hay que vivir. Hay que vivir. Intentamos partirles como hay que vivir. Some place too strong. Some places a war on. Some places a catastrophe. And some place capital KKK killing it. Some people dream dreams different than the dreams of people they were born beside. And some dreams take them true inside some families. As many reasons for leaving as for living. And the cause for leaving is living. We got to live. We got to live. But we try to leave and it's like a really long way. It's a really long walk. Really long wait, really long line. Everything you got's been a really long, long time. Shh, be silent. Shh, shh, don't even think. Shh, 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 no mouth. Shh, no sound. Shh, no voice. No, you don't even speak right. As many reasons for leaving as for living. And the cause for leaving is living. We got to live. We got to live. But we try to leave and it's like, where were you born? How much money you got? What's your final destination?
Come on now. All right.
Have you ever been convicted of a crime? Fear for your life. Do you have any skills? Are you a homo communist? Is there anyone you can call for help?
What else you can call?
As many reasons for leaving as for living. And the cause for leaving is living. We got to live. We got to live. But we try to leave and it's like, hey, did you shout from the crowd in that jail? How we map our outfit fantastic. Then we sing our way across the constellation. We're on the move. Woo! Our bodies are the earth.
On the move.
Washing our borders, burying walls. We're on the move.
We're on the move.
Washing our borders, burying walls. Love at the gate. That's the sound of justice.
Justice.
Love at the gate.
Yeah.
That's the sound of justice. Justice. Love at the gate.
Love at the gate.
I heard. That's the sound of justice. Justice. Love at the gate. I heard. That's the sound of justice. Justice. Love at the
Left of you.
Hallelujah.
Get out of the K-hole.
Amen.
Your interpreter, I think I know her. Debbie, is it Debbie? Is your interpreter Debbie?
Yes, Debbie the signer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna call. We do that. Oh, no, no. We didn't care. We didn't care. We're a little dangerous, huh? I know they pulled us up. Oh yeah, we're gonna fall off the stage. That would be good. I knew it. Good.
You want to do it with that too?
Is this on? It is. Wow, what a nice turnout. Not quite as close to the edge. Yeah, I'm good. Is it good? I'm good. I'm good. Not far. Just to get out. Just to get out. That's good. Gotta feel comfortable. Sometimes I feel so comfortable.
That's good.
East 37th Street and D. That's where I grew up. Yes. And yours.
Okay, great. So, how's everybody doing? All ready for a weekend of struggle, debate, engagement, getting angry, getting analytical, getting ready for your praxis? Good. So, I'm Professor Dave Brotherton in Department of Sociology at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and I've been asked to welcome you to this institution, this public institution that's just over 50 years old, and it's I believe it's the fourth time that Left Forum has met here. As you know, Left Forum has been going over 30 years. It deserves a round of applause. And of course, some of you may think what a strange place to have a Left Forum in a College of Criminal Justice, particularly in such an authoritarian moment through which we're living, and hopefully we will come out alive at the end of it. And it's true. Certainly, where I come from in the UK, in London, criminal justice doesn't go down too well with socialism. In fact, they're usually seen in quite the opposite sides. And it's really not that much different here only you probably, or we probably, are even far more militarised than we are in my country, in the United Kingdom, when it comes to criminal justice and the carceral society. However, if we think dialectically, there's always something else, the opposite of this terrible threat of the militarised state, which so often criminal justice exemplifies. And it's kind of inherent in the building of this institution. This institution actually has a very radical history that I'm very proud of. It was one of the first institutions to go into Attica after the uprising and offer inmates classes in the social sciences to try to grasp the kind of state terror that they'd been through. It's also an institution where the journal Radical History was born. And as Malcolm X once said, the most dangerous discipline that exists is history. And the radical history is even more dangerous. But they came out of this place. In the late 90s, when I came here from San Francisco in '94, we held here the first in New York City major gang conferences since the 60s with actual gang members present. And I mention that because, as you know, one of the great leverages, one of the great moral panics being used by the Trump administration is to cast this cloud over immigrants and people of colour that they're all members of gangs if they're 21 and under, and ripe for incarceration and ripe for deportation. So if you don't understand the hollowness of the gang concept and its pathologisation, then you won't really understand the kind of panics going on in this country at the moment that's producing not simply mass incarceration, but mass deportation on a level very few countries in the so-called advanced capitalist countries have known since the Holocaust, by the way. But in 1997, we held the first gang conferences with all the gangs of New York City, the Bloods and the Crips, the Latin Kings and the Nietas. And we asked them, what do you think of this society that puts many of your brothers and sisters in prison for life, not for 10 or 15 years, because now they bust you if you're a gang member under the Racketeering and Industrial Corrupt Organisations Act, and you're getting a minimum of 25 years. And in 2001, we held the first global gang conference here at John Jay, called Globalising the Streets, in which we asked the same things of the brothers and sisters in Central America that had been deported since 1996. In 2004, we held the first national deportation conference here in this room. In 2004, 8 years after the Immigration Reform Act of 1996, which allows you to pick up any non-citizen immigrant who is a green card holder and detain them for something they may have done 20 or 25 years ago, because it's an act which is retroactive. And as Reverend Billy rightfully talked about, Ravi Rugbeer, who we'll be talking tomorrow, who is an LPR, a legal permanent resident, and reminds us that in New York City alone, the so-called home of immigration in this country, something like 6,500 of our fellow residents get deported every year. And that's been going on for 21 years, by the way, since 1996. And I mention this because I write a lot about deportation. I did the first study on what happens to people after they've been deported in the Caribbean. And we have here something called the social anatomy of deportation, where a bunch of us academics and graduate students are putting together a whole study uniting the quest for knowledge and action, focused on what is this regime that is disappearing so many of our brothers and sisters. In April 11th, in 1 week, 250 people in New York City were picked up in the middle of the night in their homes. And that is one of dozens of raids that goes on month after month after month. And where's the demonstration, seriously? Where are we stopping this machine, as Mario Silvio once said? Why are we putting up with the disappearances? Why aren't we protesting outside Hudson County, that abomination in New Jersey that detains so many hundreds of our brothers and sisters with no constitutional rights? Why aren't we protesting outside Varick Street, not once a month, every day? Every day you go in there to the 11th floor. I challenge any of you to go up there and go in that waiting room and see your brothers and sisters crying their eyes out as they deport their fathers and their mothers and their brothers and their sisters day after day from 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the afternoon. So that's the institution you're in. But some of us are concerned about these issues. And these issues are not just abstract. They're increasingly about life and death. ICE now is the biggest police force in the United States. ICE is the biggest police force in the United States. They have a rapid deterrent force that is trained by the Navy SEALs. They're armed to the gills. They come in for our brothers and sisters at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the morning. They can tear gas them. They can kill them in their front rooms. I talk to the people who've survived this every single day, and we go on like it's not happening. And it's very interesting, in New York City, while this was going on, there was no protest until around 2004. Until they've already deported on 100,000 New Yorkers. There wasn't a single protest. And suddenly there was a protest after a guy who ran a restaurant in Washington Heights was detained for something he did 18 years ago. A guy in his 40s. And folks got together in the Heights and came down and stopped the traffic in Federal Plaza. It took 8 years for that to happen. Before Trump, Obama was one of the worst, by the way. The deportation, commandante. And it's been going on for year after year after year. So you're in an institution that, yes, produces some of these people. It produces cops. It produces COs. It produces people who want to join border control. And why? Because it's the only job left that's decent, that gives them a pension after 20 years. Such is the social mobility of the working classes here. They've been decimated, as we know, under years and years of neoliberalism. And it's that kind of institution that we work in every day, where this dialectic between desperation and hope is being played out every day in their classroom, where something like 50% of our kids are first-generation immigrants in college for the first time. So I welcome you here to this institution. I welcome you here as brothers and sisters to engage with one another, with students and faculty of CUNY, the largest urban university in the United States, as you know, and we have faced our cutbacks and our struggles, and we obviously will continue. I want to give thanks to the volunteers for Left Forum and making this possible. And I've been told to tell you we need a few more in the years coming. And I want to give thanks, obviously, to the Graduate Centre, where we're employed in the Centre for Culture, Work and Technology, where Left Forum is based, and Left Forum in the months ahead will move to John Jay and be part of the Centre for Social Change and Transgressive Studies. So without further ado, I'll introduce Richard Wolff. Richard Wolff really needs no introduction, I don't think. He's been around a long time, a leading Marxist, political economist in this country, a founder of Rethinking Marxism in 1988, and Democracy at Work. More recently, he's Professor Emeritus at University of Massachusetts Amherst, and currently visiting professor at the New School. I think he still has his radio program on WBAI, and he's often speaking down at Riverside Church, where you can be treated to his magnificent radical economic acumen. I give you Richard Wolff.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I'm here partly to moderate this evening, but also to welcome you on behalf of the board of the Left Forum, the organization that puts this event together, which, as you can imagine, with the size of this institution and the size of this room, is an enormous undertaking. And we are deeply grateful for all of your support, financial, enthusiasm, content, panels, all of it. And it is with pride as well as appreciation that we want to welcome you. I do have one final thought about John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Some people interpret it in one way, and then there are other people who think in that phrase that the word criminal is an adjective applying to the sort of justice we have. Think about it. Okay. We live in a time of extraordinary turmoil. Daily headlines scare us. Enough of us stop paying attention, which is another sign, if you needed it, of a society that is in very deep trouble. The divisions inside the United States are exacerbated more and more with each day. The divisions among capitalist countries are on display, whether it's Brexit in England, breaking away from Europe, Italy about to do something similar, Greece having been effectively pushed out, rather like Puerto Rico here, and so on and so on. This is a system in a lot of trouble. And it has a leadership that has decided that the way out is to the right. It's been deciding that for a long time, and it now has a great deal of gusto to its attempt to solve its problems. As Professor Brotherton said, by demonizing pretty much the usual scapegoats, immigrants being right now number one, but the usual other ones as well. Beating up on immigrants, like beating up on all the other scapegoats, will not solve the problems because they are systemic. They're not about these groups. And that, as that recognition settles in, the openings and opportunities for the left will also grow as they have been doing. So it was with particular interest that we decided to invite to this opening plenary, this evening before the hundreds of panels that have been put together by many of you in this room and many more that are arriving by train and bus and car and airplane, even as I speak. We decided to open it up and use the concept of opening up to say, look, there's already been an opening up. Indeed, the people on this platform have been among those who've opened up the political spaces in this country and moved them to the left. And so the Left Forum is proud to be able to present to you three of the individuals that have been very important. I'm going to introduce them in the order that we've arranged, and I'll introduce each one before he or she speaks. So I'm going to begin with the person who probably needs no introduction. Her name is Jane Sanders, and she is part She's part of an institution I will not name because you don't need it, that has opened the space for the left in this country in a way none of us, and perhaps not even them, thought possible just a few years ago. Jane Sanders is the founder of the Sanders Institute, in which she plays a major role. She has been a president of 2 different colleges in her life. She is a professional political scientist, and she is one of the closest advisors and confidants of Bernie Sanders in ways I don't have to explain. She's an extraordinary speaker and intellectual and political activist, and it is with great pride that the Left Forum introduces Jane Sanders.
Thank you. First, I have to apologize for coughing all through, and I have a terrible cold. Oh, sorry. My apologies. I have a terrible cold, but that's why I wrote down my speech more than speaking my usual way, pretty extemporaneously. First, I want to thank my fellow panelists, Gayle, who has done a fantastic job in Richmond, California, Jumaane, who's actually my city councilor, although several decades later. I would have voted for you in my own hometown there. And of course, Richard, who is also needs no introduction, fantastic person, and I'm so pleased to meet him and so many of you here. Let me begin by thanking all of you here today, every single person in this audience, for standing up for American democracy and for participating in the political process. I'd also like to thank the Left Forum for your leadership and understanding that in a very complicated world, it's important that ideas be presented in beyond tweets, Instagram posts, and 7-second sound bites. I want to thank you for helping serious people get serious ideas out to the public. During Bernie's 2016 presidential campaign, he stated over and over again that the future of our country was dependent on our willingness to make a political revolution. His mantra, not me, us, was a recognition that real change never takes place from the top on down. It always happens from the bottom on up. No real change in American history, as all of you know, not the labor movement, not the women's movement, not the gay rights movement or the environmental movement or any other movement, has ever happened without grassroots activism, without millions of people engaged in the struggle for justice. The work that all of you and other progressives have been doing over decades, constantly, is what has moved us forward. At a time of massive and growing income and wealth inequality, when our nation moves closer and closer to an oligarchic form of government, we need an unprecedented grassroots political movement to stand up for the many, not just for the few. The good news is that we're making significant progress, despite what you may see or read in the mainstream media. On issue after issue, the American people are moving toward a progressive agenda. We are winning the ideological battle. Despite a mainstream media obsessed with ATT, all Trump, all the time, it is important to remind ourselves that ideas that seemed radical only a few years ago are now supported by a strong majority of the people. There's overwhelming support for raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. pay equity for women, Medicare for all, and progressive tax reform. There is overwhelming agreement that we have to pass comprehensive criminal justice reform and immigration reform. 80% of the people support DACA, and a strong majority, support a path towards citizenship. There's overwhelming agreement that we have to address the climate change crisis. These are no longer left ideas. They can't be dismissed any longer. Given all that, you may ask why we have a president, a Congress, state legislatures, governors, and mayor's seats held by a large extent by the Republicans. In my view, that has a lot to do with the failure of the Democratic Party to open its doors to progressive people and progressive ideas. It also has to do with the power of money in the party, in both parties. The establishment members of the Democratic Party believe they have to move to the right to attract Republicans. Their consultants tell them that it's the only way to win elections. They figure the traditional base and the progressive base will have nowhere to go. Given the abysmal turnout in recent elections, they don't seem to realize that the better option might be to reach out to the people who have dropped out of our democracy because it doesn't make any sense to vote in their lives. It doesn't make any difference. In my view, the Democratic Party has to become a progressive party. If it does not, if it is unwilling to absorb the needs of working people, the idealism of young people, to turn away, if it's unwilling to turn away from the corporate profit motives of, I'm sorry, I've got a cold and it's fogging my brain, I guess. If it doesn't agree to turn away from the corporate profit motives of their large donors, to actually talk with and listen to the people around this country from different backgrounds, there will be a continued loss of faith in the electoral process, and there will be a third party. Now, I know a lot of people here are members of third parties, or independents, or members of DSA. I'm an independent myself. Having said that, I'm going to ask you to consider doing something that you might not agree with, that seems a bit off, but I think it deserves some thought at this point in time. Consider registering to vote in the Democratic primary. I knew that would be that would be some, but consider it, not just in New York, but in all states. Let me tell you why. These are the qualifying rounds. If you don't vote in the primaries of the two major parties that exist at this point, the sad reality is that in the general election in the United States, as usual, you will be left with two establishment choices with center to right-wing ideologies. If progressives are running in the primaries in your states, we need to be there to support them and move the party in a progressive direction. The first primary I voted in was to support Jesse Jackson because I believed he would make a difference. Believe me, I know what I'm asking. Let me tell you why. In my view, we're living in an unprecedented and pivotal moment in American history. On one side, there is the Donald Trump vision for America, a vision congressional Republicans have been complicit in, given their silence. On the other side, there's a progressive vision for the future of our country, a vision we all share. In the middle are the establishment politicians. As you probably recall, Donald Trump campaigned on draining the swamp, on getting special interests out of government. Yet he has brought more billionaires and Wall Street executives into the administration than any other president in the history of our country. Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg talked about an American government of the people, for the people, and by the people. I think it's fair to say that Donald Trump, more than any president in history, has created a government of the wealthy, by the wealthy, and for the wealthy. As candidate, Trump said that he would stand with working people and the forgotten American. That got him a lot of votes. People believed him. As president, his legislative agenda has been one vicious attack after another against the needs of working families. During his campaign, he promised to provide health care for everybody. As president, he supported legislation that would have thrown 32 million Americans off of health care. His budget included a $1 trillion cut to Medicaid, a $500 billion cut to Medicare, billions in cuts to the Social Disability Fund, and massive cuts to education, nutrition, and affordable housing, including a Trump budget which proposed massive cuts, which include massive cuts to education and environmental protection. But it's not just his reactionary agenda that concerns me. President Trump has made clear his support and affection for authoritarian regimes. And most dangerously, we have a president who is actively trying to divide this nation up based on the color of our skin, our gender, the country we were born in, our religion, or our sexual orientation. We cannot have a just society and a strong democracy with this kind of leadership, and we cannot allow the complicity of the Republican Party to go unchallenged. The Republican members of the House and Senate are going along with the president's unethical, racist behavior because they agree with his economic, regulatory, and social policies. Some will decry him when they go back home to their districts, but they do nothing to stop him in D.C. The move toward oligarchy in our country not only impacts our politics, it impacts our economy and the standard of living of working people. The current level of income and wealth inequality in this country is immoral and is causing massive suffering for the working families of our country. Today, the 3 wealthiest people in America own more wealth than the bottom 50%, over 160 million people. According to Time magazine, from January 1st through May 1st of this year, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, saw his wealth increase by $275 million every single day. Meanwhile, thousands of Amazon employees are forced to rely on food stamps, Medicaid, and public housing because their wages are just too low. We all know that that is replicated by the Walton family at Walmart as well. And when we talk about wealth inequality, let us keep in mind that the wealth gap between white Americans and African Americans has more than tripled over the last 50 years. Today, the median white family has almost 10 times as much wealth as the median black family. Right now, over 40 million Americans are officially living in poverty, and 140 million Americans are struggling economically. Over half of older Americans have no savings and no idea how they will be able to retire with any shred of dignity. Unbelievably, up to 20% of people in jail in America today, some 400,000 people, are being imprisoned because they lack the money to pay for cash bail or to pay fines for minor infractions. The younger generation may be surprised to hear this, but 50 years ago, one wage earner could support his or her family. Today, despite all the new technology and increased worker productivity, it takes 2 people working, sometimes more than one job, to raise a family because the price of healthcare, prescription drugs, Housing, education, energy, and childcare has gone up at a far, far higher pace than wages. The American vision for the future, our vision must be to create a government and an economy that works for us all, not just a handful of billionaires. To do that, we must have the courage to confront this oligarchy and restore power to the many, not the few. Our vision, the vision of the progressive community, is just a little bit different than that of Trump and his colleagues. Instead of oligarchy and authoritarianism, we believe in a vibrant democracy. What does that mean? It means that instead of giving over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large profitable corporations, we must demand Congress act to ensure that Wall Street, the billionaire class, and large profitable corporations start paying their fair share in taxes. At a time when governments all over the world are imposing austerity measures on their people, the wealthiest people and the most profitable corporations in the world are stashing at least $21 trillion in offshore tax havens and avoiding their tax responsibilities. We need not only national legislation, but international cooperation to end this tragedy. We need to stop imprisoning people for smoking marijuana and making it, and for being poor and not being able to afford cash bail. We live in an unprecedented moment in American history, and we need an unprecedented response. Together, Black, white, Latino, Native American, Asian American, women, men, gays, straight, young and old, we must not allow Donald Trump or anyone else to divide us up. At this excellent conference, I'm sure you will hear about the need to make certain that healthcare in this country is a right, not a privilege. You'll hear discussion about raising the minimum wage. I'm sure there'll be discussion about the need to protect a woman's right to choose and not have local, state, or federal government take away that right. There'll be discussion about rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure and creating decent paying jobs by doing so. There'll be discussion about fundamental education reform, about moving the country to universal and affordable child care, pre-K education, and strengthening public education. There will be discussion about the need to end racism in our criminal justice system, to end the failed war on drugs, and to make dramatic reforms to a criminal justice system which is failing us every single day. There'll be discussions about the need for comprehensive immigration reform, protecting the 1.8 million young Americans eligible for the DACA program, and the need to develop a path towards citizenship. There will certainly be discussion about the crisis of climate change and the need to transform our energy system away from fossil fuels towards energy efficiency and sustainable energy. All of those issues, and others that I haven't mentioned, are enormously important, and we must do everything possible to move them forward. But there's one issue out there which, unless we successfully confront, will make it impossible for us to succeed on any of these important ones. The simple fact is that in the United States today, we have a very small number of people who exercise extraordinary power over our economic, political, and social life. Make no mistake about it, the oligarchy in this country is destroying our vision of America and is moving us toward a government that represents their interests, not the other 99%. And that is a direction we must oppose with every fiber of our being. People in every region of our country are standing up and fighting back against the dishonest and reactionary president in the history of our country. In state after state, they're taking on establishment politicians who are more concerned about protecting their wealthy campaign donors than the needs of the middle class and working people they are supposed to represent. We're making progress when millions of people in every state in the country take to the streets for the Women's March in opposition to Trump's reactionary agenda. We're making progress when an unprecedented grassroots movement elects a young African American as mayor of Birmingham, Alabama. We're making progress when tens of thousands of Americans turn out in rallies and town meetings to successfully oppose the Republican efforts to throw 30 million people off of health insurance. We're making progress when governors and local officials announce in response to student demands tuition-free public colleges and universities. We're making progress when in 2017, hundreds of first-time candidates from every conceivable background run for school board, city council, state legislature, and other local offices, and many of them win. The good news is that the American people are far more united than the media allows us to believe. They get it. They know that over the last 40 years, despite a huge increase in worker productivity, the middle class has continued to shrink while the very rich have become much richer. They know that without action, for the first time in the modern history of the United States, our kids will likely have a lower standard of living than their parents. Our job, for the sake of our kids and grandchildren, is to bring our people together around a progressive agenda. Today, what the American people want is not what they are getting. In fact, under Republican leadership in the House, Senate, and White House, they are getting exactly the opposite of what they want. The American people want a government which represents all of us. Instead, they're getting a government which represents the interests and extremist ideology of wealthy campaign contributors. They want a nation in which all people are treated with dignity and respect, and where we continue our decades-long struggle to end discrimination based on race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or nation of origin. Instead, they have a president who seeks to win political support, appealing to those very prejudices. Over the last few years, I've traveled, sometimes with Bernie and sometimes by myself, to every region of this country, and I've learned a lot. I've seen the beauty, strength, and courage of our people. I've also seen the fear and the despair. I've talked to people with serious illnesses in West Virginia who worry about what will happen to them and their families if they lose their health insurance. I've talked to immigrants in Arizona who live in fear every day that they or members of their family will be deported from the only country they have ever known. I've talked to retirees and older workers in Kansas who are outraged that as a result of congressional legislation, they could lose up to 60% of the pensions they were promised. I've talked to workers right here in New York who, as a result of gentrification, are no longer able to live in the neighborhoods they grew up in. I've talked to family members around the country who've lost loved ones to the opioid and heroin epidemic. In school, we teach our children to understand and appreciate the sacrifices that veterans made in defending our way of life. But we spend too little time explaining to them what we mean by way of life. Getting back to Gettysburg, Abraham Lincoln in November 1863, soon after that terrible battle that claimed tens of thousands of casualties, reminded our citizens what that way of life was and what our enduring responsibility in a democratic society is. We here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. Creating a nation that works for all. This was worth fighting for in 1863. It's still worth fighting for today. Maintaining a vibrant democracy based on principles of justice has never been easy. And as much progress as we make, we have never achieved that vision. In these dangerous and somewhat unprecedented times, it may seem more difficult than ever, but we have to keep fighting. I'm trying to wrap it up because we're running a little late, but let me finish this. More and more mainstream political coverage is devoted to gossip, issues of personality and the latest scandals, and less to the major problems facing our country and the world. There's almost no discussion devoted to climate change. There's no discussion on a number of issues. This conference is about some of what all of us have been trying to accomplish over the last several years. Much of it is outside the Beltway with this group, and what's happening inside the Beltway is not really worth talking about. We must create a vibrant democracy where the voices of all people are heard. We must create a vision where the voices of all, which leads the world in the struggle for peace. Excuse me. The future requires a number of efforts. So let me close with talking a little bit about the future. The current campaign finance system allows billionaires to buy elections. We need to overturn Citizens United and bring about public funding of elections. Until we have the votes in Congress to do so, remind everyone you know that those incredibly negative television ads, emails, and mailings are paid for by the Koch brothers or some other billionaire who's trying to block progressives from winning. And encourage them to speak out loudly in support of issue-oriented debates and civil discourse. Let the media and the candidates know that doing otherwise will cost them their viewership and their elections. The disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision is undermining American democracy. Today, we have the Koch brothers and a few of their billionaire friends planning to spend up to $400 million in support of candidates who protect the wealthy and the powerful. We have Sheldon Adelson, who just announced $30 million to prop up the Republican effort to maintain control of the U.S. Congress. In campaign after campaign, all across this country, we have super PACs funded by billionaires competing with other super PACs funded by other billionaires to determine congressional representation. And we have big money interests who are pushing voter suppression efforts all over the country to deny people of color, older people, poor people, young people, the right to participate in the political process. If we are serious about our desire to maintain representative government in this country, one person, one vote, we have to address that. A major focus of our attention has to be raising voter turnout. A significant increase in younger voters is especially important, as younger voters are far more progressive than the general population. No generation is less bigoted, less homophobic. An increase in low-income voters and people of color. And I believe progressive voters need to change their strategy and vote in much greater numbers in the primaries. We have one of the lowest voter turnouts, designed quite intentionally to protect the status quo. We've heard a lot about Republican governors and legislatures working overtime to suppress the vote, making it harder to vote, but we need to recognize it's not a one-party problem. In the last midterm election in 2014, only 37% of the eligible voters voted. 80% of young people and low-income people didn't vote. Millions of people across the spectrum have given up on the political process. What can you do? The Sanders Institute has created a series of videos that address voter issues with specific steps. I won't go into them all here now, but every individual can make a difference. Most importantly, learn about your particular state's regulations. Speak out about those that need to change. We're in New York, one of the worst offenders in terms of voter suppression. 3 million people were unable to vote in the Democratic primary in the presidential election in 2016 because they failed to register as Democrats in October of 2015. 6 months before the election. Band together and fight to change that. We need to get more people involved, break down the fears of newcomers about running for office. Progressives should not concede any state in this country. Bernie has been to 28 states since the presidential election, and it's clear that the American people are very dissatisfied with the status quo. And there are signs that are obvious. In Pittsburgh, 2 women, members of DSA, won landslide victories against incumbents. 500 volunteers certainly helped make the difference. Finally, we need to be creative. I've always believed that if we approach problems by finding out why people want what they want, we can find more common ground and be able to creatively address those differences. The effort by Sean King and Real Justice to elect district attorneys who want to fight for criminal justice is one example of that. Larry Krasner, the new DA in Philadelphia, now requires his DAs to provide a breakdown of the costs associated with sending offenders to prison. He's saving lives, saving taxpayers' money, and educating citizens about the impact of such high levels of incarceration. Even conservatives like what he's doing. That's creative. There are many, many other examples, and I'm sure you'll hear about them over the course of this conference, as they are efforts that many of you are involved in. Share those stories. The ongoing work that many in this audience have done for years is more important than ever. Thank you for your work and for your support of our efforts. I look forward to continuing to work toward real change with you in the coming months and years. Thank you.
I wanted to clarify, because a couple of you asked, our decision on the board to invite Jane Sanders is not about agreeing and disagreeing with this or that specific, particularly the question of the Democratic Party and so on. We understand the differences of opinion. But what we felt was that what Jane and Bernie did in this country, teaching the American people that there were millions of them who thought that way when so many of them didn't think that was possible, could, would, and did change American politics in ways we all need to thank them for having the courage to undertake that effort the way they did. The opening to the left, which is what the Left Forum is about too, finds a partner in Bernie and Jane, and that was the basis for our wanting to honor, in a sense, what they've achieved. Okay, I'm going to turn next to our second speaker. She's not as well known as Jane Sanders, although that may change soon. Let's see. Her name is Gayle Mclaughlin. She has the distinction of having been a 2-time mayor of the city of Richmond, California. It's in the Bay Area, for those of you with rusty geography. But here is a woman who not only served on the city council, not only won 2 elections and ran this city, but what she did was an uncompromising commitment to the very kinds of issues and values that Jane spoke with us about and that brings all of you here. She was particularly effective, and this is just the things that struck me, in using the principle of eminent domain to really do something for her people after the crisis of 2008, a creative use of that law for people not normally benefiting from it. She's a major fighter for rent control. But the thing that struck me most was that she stood up to the economic powerhouse the oligarchy Jane spoke to us about that dominates Richmond, the Chevron Oil Corporation, of which she was a major problem in a way that I think everyone here needs to applaud. But even more interesting, because she doesn't stop, she is currently a candidate to be the next Lieutenant Governor of the state of California. It is with great pleasure that I introduce Gayle Mclaughlin.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, for that lovely introduction. Thank you to all the organizers of Left Forum. Thank you to Jane Sanders and Jimana Williams for being here on this panel. It's a great, great honor to be here. Now, as was stated, I'm the former two-term mayor of Richmond, California. I served 13 years as a corporate-free elected official in Richmond. I ran 4 elections and won them all without a penny of corporate money, in spite of the fact that Chevron, this big oil refinery in our city, spent millions of dollars to try and defeat me and others. And to give you an example, in 2014, Chevron spent $3.5 million to try and defeat me and 2 other progressives, and we all won, and all the Chevron candidates lost. So we've shown it can be done in Richmond. And today, as of November 2016, and we've been doing this for a while, we formed a progressive alliance, which I want to share a little bit about to all of you. As of November 2016, we hold 5 corporate-free council seats out of 7 total. That's a super majority on the city council. So we completely turned around the composition of the council because prior to our alliance forming, Chevron had control of all the council members. So we did all this work to turn things around so we can make a transformation in the quality of life for our residents. Because Richmond was known as a city with high crime and was known as a city with a lot of pollution and poverty and all the problems that an urban environment has. But we pushed really, really hard, and we made an amazing transformation. We pushed back on big oil, and we won, and we changed the quality of life for our residents. We raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We passed the first new rent control law in California in 30 years. We reduced crime dramatically, a 75% reduction in homicides over the 8 years I was mayor. We did this by addressing the root causes of crime, a novel idea, giving opportunities to people. We also got over $100 million in additional city taxes from Chevron. We limited their pollution. We became part of a community choice energy program where our residents get cleaner and greener energy today. And we supported our immigrants. Richmond is a sanctuary city, and we supported our public schools against privatization, and so much more. And we were able to do all of this because we were committed to advancing independent political power. We formed the Richmond Progressive Alliance, or the RPA, as we call ourselves, in 2003 because we had had enough, and we decided to become the leaders we were waiting for. I'm a co-founder of the RPA, and we came together regardless of party preference or no party preference. We came together based on our progressive values. And we decided to build a local movement and run local candidates for local office without any corporate money. Now, you could learn a lot more about the challenges and the successes we had in a book I wrote, and there's, some of you may have gotten this card, there's a table over on this side of the auditorium, so pick up a book before you leave. Now, over the last year, I was part of the RPA outreach team. We decided to start engaging with other cities and communities to tell them, the Richmond story and to share our model of organizing. And We encouraged other cities to do like Richmond did and build a progressive alliance and run corporate-free candidates. And then we launched this campaign for lieutenant governor to keep this organizing effort going. This campaign is an organizing effort. But now we have the hope of a real victory on June 5th in California's open primary. I'm running as an independent to unify progressives based on our progressive values. And we're really, really doing extraordinarily well. We've had many, many successes. We've rallied progressive forces up and down the state. We've rallied with and have gotten the endorsements from the National Our Revolution group and 38 California Our Revolution chapters, which is pretty much all the active Our Revolution chapters. We've gotten the National Democratic Socialists of America endorsement and about a dozen local chapters of DSA. We've gotten the State California Green Party endorsement, Peace and Freedom Party endorsement, Socialist Alternative endorsement, Movement for a People's Party endorsement, and many, many other progressive groups. We've shared the RPA model with hundreds of groups, thousands of individuals, and at least a dozen new progressive alliances have emerged in California following the RPA model. So we've reached out. Thank you. It's very important because we need that grassroots, as Jane spoke to, organizing in our cities and really building that power from the local level upward. And we've also reached out and educated millions, and I say millions of voters with social media, texting, phone banking, and emailing, of course. And we've also embraced other corporate-free candidates running in California. That's been a real catchphrase, corporate-free candidates, and we've gotten lots of them in California. And so we've come together as a group dubbed the Gayle Force. Somebody put that name out there. So I'm really honored that people are coming together based on corporate-free running as candidates. Now, some of these candidates are progressive Democrats who are fighting the good fight within the Democratic Party, and we encourage them to keep fighting that good fight. Others of us are standing outside the two-party system, knowing the entrenchment of corporate control, and we feel we cannot wait for the prolonged struggle within the Democratic Party to be settled eventually. But we need both. We need us all. One thing we all know is that the fundamental problem of our political system is that economic power translates to political power. And this happens not only during elections, but before and after elections. Corporations control the culture of government. There's the revolving door between government and lobbyists and patronage who keep this corporate culture going. Money and greed dominate the scene. One of my opponents for California Lieutenant Governor has her father, who owns a one of the largest land development companies in the country, and he has donated $5 million to a super PAC for his daughter in this race for Lieutenant Governor. And this super PAC is sponsored by the California Medical Association, which opposes Medicare for all. So you see this $5 million from the father of a candidate, and this candidate herself put in $2.5 million of her own money. So this is what we're up against. But we're getting, the word is out that we're there and we're uniting to really show a way out of this mess of corporate control. And the only way out of this sad state of affairs is to select candidates who play by a different set of rules, who will help build a movement with real power and to build the needed consciousness to challenge corporate domination of our society. And to also pick and select candidates who are aware that we are in a class struggle and who know which side they're on, the side of working people. So we need to build power, organization, and unity to ideally win elections so that we can keep building power, organization, and unity in non-election years. Until we are so powerful, so organized, so clear and united as to do all that is needed to change society for the betterment of all. So this is a time of struggle, but the future is ours. Thank you very much.
Can you begin to taste what winning might feel like? You can win. Gayle and her people have in their way already, just as Jane and Bernie have in their way, achieved amazing things. Our last speaker is someone a little bit closer here to home. Jimane Williams is a victor, a winner. He won a seat on the New York City Council, representing, I believe it's the 45th district of New York, right? 45th in Brooklyn. So he's a Brooklyn native, ran as a radical, and was elected, and now occupies not only the position on the City Council for the 45th district, but he's a deputy leader of the City Council here in New York, and is chair of the Committee on Housing and Buildings. And for the City of New York, that is an extremely important position. It's a pleasure for us to add to what Jane and Gayle have said, the perspective of Jimane Williams. Please welcome them.
What's up, troublemakers? You all right? I can smell trouble when I walk in the room. I love trouble, so. Thank you, Richard, Jane and Gayle. I'm honored to be on the panel with everyone. Everybody good? I'm going to say it's time. You say let's go. It's time. Oh, man. I'm going to say it's time. You say let's go. It's time. It's time. It's time. You got to stay, fired up for the fight. One, I have to do this. I'll be remiss. And she can stand if she wants, but, Richard referenced Malcolm X, and I just want to shout out Malek Shabazz, the daughter of Dr. Betty Shabazz, and El-Haj Malik Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, who's with us today. She's over there. She wants to stand up. Okay. I want to make sure. So, just very quickly, my name is Jimana Williams. I'm a council member from the 45th District. I am a proud former Bernie delegate, which is very hard to do in New York City. I endorse in the Prospects Park, and probably one of the biggest mic checks that we've ever had. And hopefully, in just a few months, I'll also be the Lieutenant Governor of New York State, as I'm a candidate for Lieutenant Governor as well. So, I am a first-generation American. My parents came from the island of Grenada. I'm a public school baby from preschool to master's, educated in the Brooklyn public school system. I'm very proud of that. I also have Tourette's syndrome. You may see me shake a little bit, but everything's okay. It's not the hiccups. I'm fine. I also have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which I assume most community organizers have. But I'm able to make it through. I am a community organizer by training. Most folks didn't know what it was because Obama hadn't gotten elected yet. My mother swore that I would never make a living doing it. And I would go to rooms like this, and I would say I'm a tenant organizer. They thought I was saying tennis. They would ask me about tennis lessons, which means they didn't listen to anything I said for the whole time. But that's the type of thing I was doing and how I made my bread and butter. And then I decided I wanted to get into electoral politics, and I ran for what was then an open seat because of term limits. They overturned term limits. This is another conversation. And I ended up having to run against an incumbent. Everybody said I was crazy to do so because there were 6 people in the race, and you know what that means. It's very tough. But we did it anyway. The Most High lined everything up. And I've been trying to cause as much trouble in the City Council for the past 9 years as humanly possible, also in the city of New York. And it's strange because the biggest complaint that I used to get till about maybe 2 years ago was I was too much of an activist, too much activism. You have to decide if you want to be an activist or an elected official. And I said, I don't, first of all, thank you for recognizing the activism. Second of all, I don't believe you have to choose. I think that's the wrong way to do this. Nothing happens without activism. And I didn't get elected to get reelected. I got elected to do a job, and hopefully that job will get me reelected. So we're thinking about this all wrong. And so I kept my activism, and I pushed and I pushed. I probably have the distinction of being the elected official arrested the most times for civil disobedience. Some of them were not planned. That's a whole nother story. But now everybody's trying their best to show how much of an activist they are, whether they've ever been knocked on the door, ever been in the street marching. It's an amazing thing to see. But I wanted to show that you can be a productive activist elected official. And we sought out to do that. We sought out to pass bills, very difficult bills. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago, City and State, for those who don't know, is a publication that looks at all elected officials across the state. They ranked me as the most productive council member after the speaker in the 51-member body of the city council, which was a very big thing for me and a very big thing for us to show that you don't have to choose between one or the other. As a matter of fact, I always took the toughest bills, the bills that told me you couldn't get done and the ones that were problematic for your political career. Those are the ones that I grabbed. And for those who live in New York, how many people live in New York? You remember the abuses of stop, question, and frisk that was occurring there. You actually need to be able to stop, question, and frisk people legally and constitutionally. But what they were doing was abusing that. They actually stopped more young men than actually lived in the city, more young black men than lived in the city of New York one year. And we said, that might be too much. And so we think we have better ways to deal with violence. We can ask for better policing and safer streets at the same time. And so I took some bills to put the first time with myself, Councilman Brad Lander, first time Inspector General over the police department, and some bills to deal with the abuses of stop, question, and frisk. And we had some other ways to deal with the gun violence. And they told us at that time if we passed those bills and did what we wanted to do, the sky would crack open. There's always Armageddon that's going to happen. The black and brown kids would fall from it. They would destroy each other and destroy the entire city. And we said, no, we represent these communities. We understand that public safety is not equated to law enforcement. Public safety means that people have the things that they need to be able to live a good life. And so if we do that, we'll have a better way of doing this. And we did that. And that was about 6 or 7 years ago. We got the bills passed. We overturned Mayor Bloomberg and Commissioner Kelly's veto. And last year, according to NYPD's own data, we were the safest city we've ever been since 1951. And so the things that we pushed forward, we know were correct. And so I got here because I ran for Speaker of the City Council, which I knew was tough because you have to be an inside person. There's a lot of inside politics. That's not me. It's never been. But I think that the voice was needed to be heard. While that was happening, somebody said, I want to float your name to run for governor. And I said, that's pretty dope because I'm just a council member. So float ahead. Do your thing. But as the speaker race was winding down, we thought, why not look at this lieutenant governor position like you? No one ever actually looks at lieutenant governor in the state of New York. And I thought it was a pretty powerful position. It turns out most people who are lieutenant governor, the way they gauge success is if you are rubber stamping whatever the governor says, if you are parrot to whatever the governor says, and if you cut ribbons. And I said, that's not a good way to gauge success. I don't want to be any governor's lieutenant governor. I want to be the people's lieutenant governor. So I'm wanting to raise the voices of people in the state of New York. I'm not going to parrot anything the governor says. I'm not going to rubber stamp what the governor says. I do always say I want to keep the ribbon cutting because they're fun, but I want to add some substance to the job. And so here we are, and this is why I'm here. Honored to be at Left Forum, so I thank you very much for inviting me. Just really briefly, I always want to make sure I clarify some things because I don't think I'm trying to change the system. I don't think I'm trying to reform the system. I think the system in this country is operating how it was designed to operate. It is operating from the way it was designed from the inception of this country. So anytime this craziness occurs and I hear the bigotry and the homophobia and all this stuff, and people say, this is not America, and I say, yeah, this is America. It's exactly who America is and what America was founded on. And I want to be clear about that. But also America is the people in this room. And so that's very exciting to me as well, that I'm a part of that America. And that excites me as well, too. So we're not trying to change the system. I'm trying to uproot the whole goddamn thing and put it in something else. And that's what we have to do. Because if you're in a house and there's a small crack in the wall, you might be able to repair that. But if the foundation of the house It's jacked up from the beginning. You got to change that foundation. That's why it's so hard. That's why it's so difficult. If it was just a fix, we'd be able to fix it already. But we've seen throughout history this playbook happen all the time. This creation of the other, this dehumanizing of the other, which eventually and always leads to violence and possibly genocide. And so, first of all, I want everybody to say, it can happen here. I want everybody to say, it can happen here. Now say, it is happening here. That is very important, because if you go back in history and all these times, there was times like this when somebody who was called a clown was raised up to power and created an other and started dehumanizing them, and a lot of craziness followed after that. And so we have to be clear where we are right now. But as I close, I'm not sure what a progressive means anymore, because everybody says that they are one. So I've added the word courageous next to it. I am a courageous progressive. Not just when it's safe, you test the winds and you jump out and see where it is. I'm a progressive, a lefty, whatever the polls say, I know what is the right thing to do. And we on the left have always made things popular for established Democrats to talk about. They wouldn't be talking about legalizing weed. They wouldn't be talking about bail reform if it wasn't for us pushing these issues. And it's frustrating to me because we do it every single time, and then they talk about party unity in the Democratic world, and that usually means left, shut up. They have no culpability for what they need to do for unity. And the right and the Orange Madness, they took a Hail Mary a couple years ago with bigotry and hatred. The Dems will never take a Hail Mary on love and equity and justice. And I'm looking forward for the day when they will, because our arguments are morally correct, they are factually wrong. And we have to ride on that. They are doing better at messaging than the progressives. They are doing better at making people believe that the answer to their problems are the other black, brown immigrant folks who are there. Because that's easier to do than to say the whole system is set up for a few people to survive off the backs of the rest of us. Capitalism is the best pyramid scheme I've ever seen. You can't have super rich without having super poor. That is just a fact. But we have to be able to point out that we have the answers for everybody to live a better life. Everybody. Now, there are bigots and racists. They're just true. Those people exist. They are there. All right? But most people, I believe, all want the same thing. They want to have a good house to live in. They want to have food on the table that tastes okay. They want their kids to go to good school and have a better life than they did. We have the answer for those things, and it's not based on bigotry and racism. We just have to have the fortitude to keep moving forward, because it's going to be difficult, because the status quo is the status quo, because it is hard to change and people want it to be that. So I just want to leave on a message of hope, which is that we can get this done, even through this madness, and I hope we learn our lesson, because as was said, the Republicans that prop this average man up need to be held accountable, but so do a whole lot of damn Democrats across this country who were governors, mayors, city council members, all along this ride that laid this fertile ground for this man to come in. The bigotry and racism didn't start when he got elected. It was here before, it will be here after. It's up to us to continue to push back. We are that America, we are history. Thank you so much. Peace.
In the time that we have left, we have a few questions that we're going to ask the three panelists to comment on, in the hopes that that will bring out more of the kinds of insights they have already offered us. So let me begin with the first one. Many of us were struck this last few months with an enormous upsurge led by the public school teachers in the state of West Virginia, who showed all of us that the idea that the mass of working people were passive, would continue to take what is being dished out by the oligarchy that runs the country, and wouldn't do anything, either with or without unions. And those teachers, particularly in West Virginia, but as many of you know, it has since spread to quite a few other states. But I wanted the comments of the thinkers up here on the stage and the activists up here on the stage. What lesson do we draw from the fact that the public school teachers in West Virginia were able to strike to shut down every single public school system in every county of the state of West Virginia at the same time on the same day? This was a level of organization that would make any union proud. And they did it on their own. They weren't set back by differences between white and black and male and female and all the rest of the divisions. What's the lesson here that each of our panelists, if you have a moment, might want to draw from that? And you can use your mics there.
Well, I would say the lesson to be drawn is that it can be done, and it is happening. The fact that it has happened in West Virginia and it has spread. I know there have been strikes and rallies in California, and it shows that consciousness is rising to the surface. All the seeds that many of us have been planting in the audience, on this panel, the work that you've done, Richard, has been work that has planted these seeds that people deserve better. And these teachers are knowing that they and their union members deserve better, but also the students that they teach deserve better, because, you know, when you don't have the decent wages and the benefits that, you know, that you need to help your own family as a teacher, you cannot provide the kind of support for the students that they need. So I think it shows that we are making cracks in the system, that working people are rising up in their consciousness, and that, you know, we can keep going, and that things do snowball.
Jumaane?
What's the lesson? I mean, the main lesson to me is sometimes you got to shut some shit down. That is the primary lesson I get out of that. And we shouldn't be afraid to do that. And when you interrupt the status quo, things do change. Now, I'm not going to say you have to jump straight to that, but it's a very real thing, and we shouldn't be afraid of it. Elected officials, look, myself, Councilmember Ydanis Rodriguez, and 16 others, I'm sure there's some in this room, we shut down some streets to prevent Ravi Ragbear, immigration activist, from getting deported. We all got arrested. It was the worst thing I participated in. It was very scary. We were thrown across the street. However, because we did that, Ravi is still in this country, and he is still doing his work. I wish every immoral deportation had the kind of attention that Ravi had, and it didn't. But if it did, darkness hates light. And so the more we can shine light on things, the better we are. I'm sure it took a lot of organization, but we have to. My thing right now, if you are comfortable, you're not doing enough. We have to push ourselves past the discomfort. And it's you know, human beings, it's human nature. We have a tendency to take risks to keep what we have, but not risks to reach for the sky. And we have to change that. We just have to change that.
Jane?
I think the only thing that I would add to that is that teachers were, as you said, extremely organized, and the populace supported them. So one of the lessons is maybe it's not our fight, but we need to be in it with the people that we support. So we've seen this across the nation, Kentucky, a number of places where the teachers are taking the lead, but the parents and the students are standing with them. We saw it with the Parkland students, and the adults stood with the students. We've seen it with nurses in terms of leading the way from Medicare for all, and many people combined with them to support them. So the important thing, I think, is that what we need to realize is while we each have our focuses in terms of what we're working on, we need to support our colleagues that are fighting for progressive change.
A second question that we came up with where we would like your response. As the economic system we live in has a harder and harder time providing decent jobs, decent benefits, decent security of work, decent prospects for improvement, as we know. There has been a tendency in every capitalist country, not just the United States, to distract people's upset about the economic realities they face and that their children face by focusing themselves instead on what is, as an economist, which is what I do for a living, one of the more remarkable, absurd ideas that have become powerful. The idea that a handful of 1 million, 5 million, 10 million immigrants from some other place are your problem, and that beating them up and throwing them out and arresting them in the middle of the night, all the things we heard about, is some sort of response to the economic crisis that masses of people face. The ability to distract, to deflect popular upset at a system that isn't working onto the poorest of the poor amongst us is an extraordinary, not just condemnation on moral grounds, but an extraordinary PR feat, if you think about it. And I was wondering what the three of you might have to say, because you're all having to deal with the immigration issue one way or another. Jane, you want to start? We'll go the
That's
other way?
one of the concerns, is that we have a leader in this country who's a demagogue, and he is allowing that kind of bigotry to flourish in our country. We thought we had come a ways, but I think it was just under the radar. People thought it wasn't okay to say things that they say now much more frequently. It wasn't okay to treat people the way that they now treat people. So this is nothing new, you know. I mean, forever. I mean, when the Irish came to the country, when the Italians came to the country, I mean, it's always been this. But what we need to do is recognize and educate people as much as we possibly can about this causes that, and what this guy is telling us, and what the Republican Party and, you know, well, some Democrats are not so bad on immigration, but what the establishment politicians are telling us is not. It just doesn't even make logical sense. I don't really have anything more to say about that, because it's really disheartening to see it happen. And what we need to do is each one of us individually call it out every single time that we experience it, that we see it.
Right?
Jumaane,
sorry.
you got close. It's okay.
I know.
I want to say one thing. Parkland was mentioned. It's always something I always want to mention. I'm amazed at what those students have done. It's just amazing to see the support, and I continue to support them. I would just ask folks, there are organizations, young people in black and brown communities who actually deal with gun violence every single day that are not getting the attention they deserve, and their lives are just as important, and they are dealing with the same scourge of gun violence. So, for some reason, the face of gun violence is beginning to change, but the stories of the people who deal with them every single day are not that face, and I just want to make sure I always put that out there. And I would say, I would ask folks to listen to the affected communities, because we would have told you that what was happening and bubbling in the ground long before Donald Trump. But we kept hearing we're in a post-racial America, and I just didn't see it, you know. But now we have Trump there. I mean, it's as I said before, it is easier. It's fascinating. Bigotry and hatred is not really logical. It's not a logical thing. There's nothing you can point to that's saying beating up anybody, beating up these groups of people will make your life better. But it's easier to do that, I guess, than to fight the system. And Trump and the rich people, we have richer people now than we did before the recession. And in New York State, the top 1% are 45 times more than the bottom 99%. That's insane. And I wanted to ask you something too, because I was talking about with my staff, with Marx, who always thought that the proletariat would one day just rise up and do what they need to do. But I think he just didn't think about the fascinating thing about capitalism. It makes all of those people believe that one day they'll be in the 1%. And that just drive makes people think, I guess one day I can actually be there. But if everybody was there, it would be socialism, and we don't like that because it's a scary word. So there has to be people at the bottom. And so it's just always fascinating to me, the same thing you're saying, that these folks who benefit from that will point to these people and harness the basest part of our gut and just beat up people instead of banding together and pushing for what's the right thing to do. But it's our job to get that message out, and I don't think we've done that job in a very good way.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think the pointing of the finger at immigrants as a problem is an indication of the fact that we have an economic crisis and the ruling class would like to blame someone. And so they're pointing the finger at immigrants. And they want us to think that. Well, most of us in this room know that immigrants contribute greatly to our economy and the diversity of our culture. But they see that they're in crisis. And to have us, fight against each other is always the strategy of the ruling class. And they see things happening, like the Black Lives Movement gaining, all this strength, and the immigration rights movement, and they want to detract from this. They want, working class people to blame a certain sector of the working class. And they see teachers, like going back to the last question, striking, and the union movement, getting active again. And of course, when unions get active, that raises up all workers, So when one union does something like a rally or a strike, it showcases that all workers have an opportunity to rise. It's that education. And another thing I wanted to bring out is they don't want us to think about the fact that U.S. foreign policy is what has caused so many people to come here in the first place. It's our military policies, our economic policies, CAFTA, NAFTA, that are that bring people into poverty, bring people into war, and cause people to come here just for the right to have a job and have a decent life. And our country has to take responsibility, and the people of this country have to know that our country has been responsible. And we have to welcome those who are here for a better life with open arms.
Okay. Here's another question that comes out of New York City history of the last month. On May 1st, here in New York City, an event took place. A group of students at the New School University, where I teach, walked into a university cafeteria where the university and the concession that runs the university cafeteria there had just told the 32 workers, mostly black and brown, that they would be fired and replaced by student laborers. The students who came in said they would not accept this action on the part of the university where they were students. They brought their sleeping bags and they proceeded to shut the place down, move in, and live there. They occupied roughly for 3 weeks, May 1 to 3 weeks later. They refused to go. They got food from all over the place to replace what was no longer being brought by the concession company. They kept the cafeteria going. Students kept coming, except it was now run by the students, not by the company, not by the university. The demand of the students was that the 32 workers would be unfired. They won that. Those 32 workers have now been guaranteed another 2 years of employment. But now the next step. That wasn't enough. Their victory led the students and the workers now working together to demand that they didn't want the 32 workers to be as insecure in the future as they obviously had been shown themselves to be in this present moment, and that therefore, over the 2 years during which their employment is guaranteed, they are going to be negotiating with the university to convert that cafeteria into a worker-run cooperative by those workers. So here we have a little moment, a little microcosm in New York. And I was wondering how the speakers respond, what they think this might mean or what they think might come out of such a little moment of history. Gayle, we'll go the other way.
Okay, I'll start. So worker-owned co-ops are definitely a great way to build democracy in the workplace. And I think the fact that these students have set the stage, you know, in this situation is an example of what could be done everywhere. And that's what we should be working for. I went to Mondragon, Spain as mayor of Richmond and learned about Mondragon, Spain as the really world capital on worker-owned co-ops. They have it's called the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation, which has like 120 co-ops, a network of co-ops, which together is the 6th largest, wealthiest business in Spain. It's an efficient economy when people work, make decisions together, and you know, make a product or a service that is beneficial for the community. And it's not exploitative as we see in capitalism. It's a way to really, you know, serve the community, but also serve democracy and benefit the worker owners. So I think it's an example of what can be done everywhere in this crisis time. As businesses may go under, these opportunities present themselves where the workers can take control, purchase. I mean, things like I'm proposing a California State Public Bank, like the North Dakota Public Bank, and with that we could give seed money to worker co-ops. There's so many ways that we could utilize this alternative economic model to help our communities.
You know, like I said, sometimes you got to shut some stuff down. So that was just another. You know, I was the first elected official to publicly endorse Occupy Wall Street. Immediately, I saw the benefits of it, and disruption of the status quo is probably the only thing that has helped move this country along in the progress. Nothing that we celebrate now didn't come from some kind of disruption. So it's always amazing to me when people are complaining about people in the streets as if that's not the way we get things done. But I definitely support worker cooperatives. It's something that we actually have funded to try to get done here in the city, and so I'm very excited about that. And I hope those students keep that energy, because sometimes you know, colleges are the bastion of that kind of energy, but you start to get older and older, and you start to lose it a little bit. I guess we didn't, which is great. So hopefully those students don't. I did want to go back to the last question really quickly. I also want to lift up the names of Claudia Gomez, who was shot and killed by ICE. Shot in the head. She was 20-year-old. Roxana Hernandez, who was a transgendered from Honduras, came for asylum here in this country and was allowed to die in ICE. And that's what's happening now. That's what happens. That's the violence that comes after you dehumanize. But I know to the question of the immigrants, and also just the illogical nature of it. So Americans, all of us, are probably the most privileged-minded, entitled folks in the entire planet. And so, you know, depending where you are and melanin, you might have some more privilege. But generally speaking, we have it. And so it's always amazing to me when I see, there was a South Park episode, I don't know if anybody watched South Park, and the catchphrase was, "They took our jobs, they took our jobs." It was very funny. But the thing is, it's so illogical. Americans don't even want the jobs that most of the immigrants have. So farmers complain that they can't get Americans to pick the fruit that are needed. And then on the top scale, we don't want to get the education needed to do the computer work and other things like that, so people have to go out. And so we're so entitled, we don't want to get we don't want to get what we need to do to get the work up here. We don't want to do the job down here. We just want somebody to give us stuff sometimes, again, which is socialism, which is a bad thing. And so the illogical nature of it is always something that's amazing to me.
I think that that story is very compelling. I don't think the media covered it nationwide. They probably covered it in New York. And that's one thing that we can push for, to just say that we need some stories, not nice stories, but good stories about what we need to be focusing on. I keep on seeing signs. So I'm like, I think that it's incredibly important that people beyond college age get involved and stand up for what we believe in when things are happening in our communities, and that we demand our local press and the national press start talking about the victories that actually help the workers in this country, and that and that actually stand up for the class struggle. I don't think that we see that at all. We do not see issues in the media at all. And to go back to what Jumaane said before about the Parkland students, you're absolutely correct. There are people in Chicago being killed every day. There are people in all over this country, and they didn't get any coverage or any real attention except Chicago's the murder capital of the world. Not what are we going to do to protect our children? What are we going to do to help our families? And what we need to do is to force that discussion and have it be at the center of our discussion throughout. The real story about the real people in America, not the phony scandals that we have to hear about all the time, not Russia, not whatever stupid tweet was sent out, but it's all Trump all the time on the national media. And what we need to do is tell those stories that show success for the working people of America.
I just want to clarify one thing because my staff was concerned. Me saying socialism is a bad thing is me being facetious. Just want to make sure that didn't get lost in the crowd.
Well, I hope you will all join me in saying that we've had victories and analysis that should make us all proud.
Go start some trouble, please.
Please know that we have planned 3 full days here. We began today, but all Saturday and much of Sunday. There's a choice among panels. People have come from all over the world. This is a time to talk, to interact, academics, activists. Make use of it. We've worked to put together this conference, and we've had a stunning beginning. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you to all of you.
Yeah, sure.